Hello and welcome to this podcast, Beyond the Battlefield, the Untold Stories of World War II, where we dive into the fascinating and complex world of this war. My name is Anna Kaufmann, and I specialize in 20th century history. As a historian and educator, one of my key focuses is the Second World War, a topic as vast as it is compelling. But what can you expect from this series? Let me be clear. This podcast is not your typical chronological rundown of the war's major events. Produced by the Academy of History and Culture, this is not about retelling the textbook version of history or adhering to a rigid canon of must-know events. If you're expecting a straightforward timeline from 1939 to 1945, you might be in the wrong place. Instead, we're here to do something different. Digging deeper, the overlooked and reimagined. Have you ever wondered about the untold stories behind the headlines of history? What about the lesser-known figures and events that shaped the war in surprising ways? In this podcast, we'll shine a light on those hidden corners of World War II that often go unnoticed. Of course, we'll also revisit some of the well-known episodes, but not in the way you might expect. We'll take a fresh perspective, challenging conventional narratives, and exploring new angles. Could it be that the stories you thought you knew still have secrets to reveal? World War II isn't just history. It's a lens through which we can better understand humanity's struggles, resilience, and capacity for both destruction and progress. By diving into these stories, we're not just uncovering facts, we're exploring the questions that still resonate today. So are you ready to go beyond the basics and see World War II in a new light? If so, join me on this journey into the known and the unknown of one of history's most pivotal eras. In this first episode of our podcast, we're starting off with a topic that's not exactly front and center in most history books: Stalin's flying witches. But who were these so-called witches, and why do their stories deserve to be told? Let's set the stage. It's 1941. And Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, is caught completely off guard. Adolf Hitler has launched Operation Barbarossa, a devastating invasion that shattered the uneasy peace between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. The Blitzkrieg ripped through Soviet defenses, and within weeks, German forces were just miles from Moscow. But Stalin wasn't just battling an external enemy. Internally, his leadership was in chaos. Paralyzed by shock and depression, Stalin had little time to react to the German onslaught. Making matters worse, his own paranoia had already dealt a devastating blow to the Red Army's Air Force. Many of his top fighter pilots had been executed or imprisoned during Stalin's infamous purges, leaving the Soviet skies dangerously unprotected. So, what did Stalin do when his Air Force was decimated and the Germans were at the gates? He made a radical decision, one that would shock both allies and enemies alike. He turned to women. Yes, in an unprecedented move, Stalin approved the formation of all-female combat units. Among these was a group of young, daring female pilots who would soon become known as the Nightwitches, in German known as Nachthexen. But why witches? And how did these women, flying outdated, flimsy biplanes, become some of the most feared aviators of World War II? Let's start at the beginning. The year is 1941. The Nazis have invaded the Soviet Union with a ferocity that left the Red Army reeling. Stalin, usually seen as unshakable, is in despair. His forces are in disarray, Moscow is under threat, and the nation teeters on the edge of collapse. In the midst of this chaos, a determined woman strides into his office, unshaken by the dire circumstances. Her name? Marina Roskova. Marina Roskova wasn't just any ordinary citizen. She was already a Soviet hero, a celebrated aviator with a string of long-distance flight records to her name. Known for her daring spirit and unmatched skill in the cockpit, Roskova was a national symbol of resilience and ambition. But now she was on a mission, not for glory, but for her country. Standing before Stalin, Roskova made her case. She proposed something audacious, something unprecedented, to form a regiment of female combat pilots. She argued that women like her, skilled, determined, and willing to sacrifice, could serve the motherland just as effectively as their male counterparts. This wasn't the first time Roskova had tried to pitch her idea. Since the Nazi invasion, she'd been knocking on doors, trying to get someone to listen. Time and again, she'd been dismissed. But Roskova was not someone who gave up easily. She persisted until she was granted an audience with the most powerful man in the Soviet Union. Imagine Stalin's reaction. Women in combat, female fighter pilots. It was a radical idea, even for a nation in crisis. Stalin, cautious and skeptical, hesitated. After all, this was a society where women were rarely seen in such roles, let alone in the skies battling enemy planes. But Roskova's determination was unshakable. She didn't just rely on rhetoric. She brought with her stories of women who shared her dream, women ready to train, fight, and die for their country. She appealed to Stalin's sense of desperation and patriotism, and eventually she managed to sway him. Against all odds, Stalin gave her the green light to create not just one, but several all-female aviation regiments. On October 8, 1941, he issued the order known as 0099, officially authorizing the creation of Aviation Group 122, a unit composed entirely of women. Female combat pilots, let that sink in for a moment. At a time when women were rarely allowed to take on combat roles in any military, Stalin's order marked a radical and unprecedented shift. The news spread quickly. Moscow radio broadcast an urgent call to arms, and telegrams were dispatched to aviation organizations across the Soviet Union. The message was clear. The country needed women to step up and take to the skies. But why women? With so many male pilots lost to Stalin's purges or consumed by the front lines of war, the Soviet Union faced a desperate shortage of trained aviators. Yet this wasn't just about filling a gap. It was about tapping into an untapped reservoir of skill and determination. Leading the charge was none other than Marina Roskova, the driving force behind the initiative. Her task was monumental. To form this elite group, she needed to recruit approximately 300 female pilots. These women wouldn't just be trained to fly. They would have to master combat tactics, handle high-pressure missions, and endure the rigors of war. So how do you find 300 women capable of such a challenge in the middle of a war? The answer was overwhelming. Applications flooded in from across the Soviet Union, thousands of them. Young women, many barely out of their teens, clamored for the chance to serve their country in the skies. Some were seasoned civilian pilots, while others had only dreamed of flying. They came from every corner of the Soviet Union, united by a shared determination to fight for their homeland. For Roskova, the abundance of applications was both a blessing and a challenge. Each applicant brought a story, a set of skills, and an unshakable resolve to prove herself. Roskova had to select the best of the best, women with the grit, courage, and raw talent to not only survive, but thrive in the male-dominated world of combat aviation. The young women chosen to join the first all-female aviation regiments were trailblazers, but their journey was anything but smooth. Once selected, these pioneering pilots were gathered at the Zhukovsky Military Aviation Academy for Air Force engineers in Moscow. Here they received their military uniforms, standard issue, but with one glaring problem. The boots were all in men's sizes. This was just the first of many challenges these women would face. Determined to prove themselves, they donned their oversized boots and prepared for the grueling road ahead. After receiving their uniforms, the women were sent to Engels, a town in southwestern Russia, where they would begin their training. But reaching their destination was an ordeal in itself. The war-torn country's railway system was on the brink of collapse, stretched to its limits by relentless German bombing. Their train was frequently forced to pull onto side tracks to avoid bomb-damaged lines or incoming enemy raids. Progress was painfully slow, and at times the women had to improvise transportation, hitching rides on trucks or cars to reach the next station. It was a trial by fire, a preview of the resourcefulness and resilience they would need in the months to come. In Engels, the real work began. Normally, pilot training would take 2 to 3 years, But these women had only 6 months to master everything. Every day was packed with an intense schedule designed to transform them from aviation enthusiasts into combat-ready pilots. Their training regimen was grueling. Mornings started early with military drills and marches designed to instill discipline and endurance. Classroom sessions followed, covering the theoretical aspects of flight, aerial combat tactics, and the mechanics of their aircraft. But the demands didn't stop there. The women also had to learn to shoot, handle weapons, and memorize Soviet military doctrine. Communist indoctrination sessions were a staple of their routine, ensuring they fully understood and embraced the ideology of the state they were fighting for. When they finally got into the cockpit, the training was relentless. They practiced takeoffs and landings, navigation, and the intricate maneuvers necessary for nighttime bombing runs. Each lesson demanded perfection. There was no margin for error in the skies over a battlefield. For these women, the pressure was immense. They weren't just learning to fly, they were proving themselves in a military institution that had only reluctantly accepted their presence. Every flight, every drill, every classroom session was a test of their will, determination, and ability to break through the barriers of doubt and prejudice. It's April 1942, and Marina Roskova stands before the group of hopeful young women she's been training. For months, these aspiring aviators have dreamed of soaring into the skies as combat pilots, ready to fight for their country. But now, reality sets in. Only a third of the 300 women will achieve their dream of becoming fighter pilots. For the others, their paths will take different but no less vital directions. They will serve as bomber pilots, navigators, radio operators, or mechanics, roles just as critical to the war effort. Roskova, the driving force behind the initiative, must now organize these women into the units that will soon become legends. Roskova reshapes the aviation group into 3 distinct squadrons, each with a unique mission and aircraft to master. The first one is Fighter Regiment 586. This elite regiment is equipped with the state-of-the-art Yakovlev Yak-1 fighter aircraft, one of the Soviet Union's most advanced planes. Fast, agile, and deadly, these planes are ideal for dogfights and aerial defense. The women of the 586th Regiment will take to the skies to confront enemy fighters head-on, proving that they can hold their own in one of the most dangerous roles of the war. The second one was Bomber Regiment 587. The 587th Regiment is tasked with precision bombing missions, flying the powerful Petlyakov P-2 bombers. Nicknamed the Peshka, this twin-engine aircraft is known for its speed and versatility. The women of this regiment will be responsible for striking strategic targets deep behind enemy lines, carrying out missions that require nerves of steel and unshakable focus. The last one was Night Bomber Regiment 588, destined to become the most famous of them all. These women will fly the Polikarpov Po-2, a small, outdated biplane that maxes out at a mere 93.2 miles per hour, or 150 kilometers per hour, comparable to the speeds of World War I aircraft. At first glance, the Po-2 seems laughably inadequate for modern warfare, but its slow speed and low-altitude capabilities make it perfect for nighttime raids. The plane's quiet engine allows it to glide close to the ground, sneaking up on enemy positions under the cover of darkness. However, flying these planes is a perilous endeavor. With no armor and minimal defensive capabilities, every mission is a gamble with death. Each assignment comes with its own challenges and risks. The fighter pilots of the 586th will face relentless enemy fire in fast-paced aerial battles. The bomber crews of the 587th will navigate flak-filled skies while carrying heavy payloads, and the night bombers of the 588th will endure freezing winds, open cockpits, and constant danger as they swoop low to drop their payloads, often returning to base with their planes riddled with bullets. These women are not just pilots. They are engineers, tacticians, and trailblazers. Roskova's leadership ensures that each of them, no matter their role, understands the importance of their mission. Together they form a cohesive force, united by their courage and determination to protect their homeland. The spring of 1942 marked a turning point for Marina Roskova's all-female squadrons. After months of grueling training, the women were finally ready to take to the skies and face the enemy. Their excitement and nerves were palpable. They had proven themselves through endless drills, mastered their aircraft, and prepared for the challenges of war. But just as they prepared for their first missions, an unexpected order arrived from the commanding officer. The decree was simple but shocking. They must cut their hair. The directive was met with mixed emotions. For many of the women, their long hair was a cherished connection to their femininity, a symbol of identity and pride in a world that constantly tried to erase it. Most complied, reluctantly trimming their locks to meet military expectations. But one pilot decided to rebel, not with words, but with quiet determination. Instead of cutting her hair, she tucked it beneath her beret, hiding her defiance in plain sight. She carried on as usual, hoping to avoid notice during the daily routines and inspections. Then came the day of an unexpected inspection. The commanding officer walked down the line of pilots, scrutinizing each one. When he reached her, he paused. His sharp gaze lingered, and the air grew tense. Her comrades held their breath, fearing the worst. "Remove your beret," he finally commanded. With little choice, she obeyed. As she pulled off the beret, her golden hair spilled out, cascading down her shoulders like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Everyone froze. Would she be reprimanded for defying the order? But instead of anger, the commanding officer did something unexpected. He laughed. A warm, hearty laugh that broke the tension like a summer breeze. Turning to Raskova, he gestured to the pilot with her flowing locks and said, "Why don't all the girls keep their hair like this? Apart from her, they all look like boys. A woman without her hair is like a horse without its mane." His comment, though laced with humor, was a striking acknowledgement of the femininity these women still carried with them into war. For the pilot and her comrades, the moment was a reminder that even in the harsh world of combat aviation, they were more than soldiers. They were women breaking barriers in a male-dominated arena. Not long after their training was complete, the squadrons were dispatched to various sections of the front lines. For the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, their orders took them to the rugged terrain of the southern Caucasus. Their new commander, Major Yevdokia Bershanskaya, led the way as the women set out for their base, brimming with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Flying in their iconic V formation, the regiment's Po-2 biplanes carved through the skies toward their destination. But suddenly, enemy planes appeared on the horizon. Panic set in. The carefully maintained formation broke apart as the women scattered, hastily landing their planes in a nearby birch forest to avoid being shot down. The tension was unbearable. Hearts pounded as they waited for the sound of gunfire, but none came. The enemy planes simply flew past without firing a single shot. Once the skies were clear, the women regrouped and cautiously resumed their journey. Upon arrival at their new base, the truth emerged, and it was as frustrating as it was embarrassing. The planes they had mistaken for German fighters weren't enemy aircraft at all. They belonged to their male colleagues, who had flown out to give the women a dramatic welcome. What the men saw as a bit of harmless fun felt like a humiliating blow to the women, who had trained tirelessly to prove themselves equal to any male aviator. But the humiliation didn't stop there. Their base turned out to be a rundown former cattle barn. The stench of manure still lingered in the air, and an old barn lamp hung from the ceiling, casting dim light across the room. It was far from the accommodations they had imagined after completing their rigorous training. The men, ever ready with jokes, christened the women's quarters the Flying Cow. The nickname spread quickly, adding insult to the already difficult conditions. The women's rocky start wasn't just a blow to their morale, it also had serious consequences for their mission readiness. Their apparent panic during the encounter with the enemy planes led their commanding officer to doubt their combat readiness. To their utter dismay, the women were grounded, confined to the base, while their male counterparts flew missions. For these fiercely determined pilots, being benched was a bitter pill to swallow. They had fought so hard to be there, and now their skills and courage were being called into question. Despite the shaky start, the women of the 588th would not let these early setbacks define them. Determined to prove their worth, they redoubled their efforts, training harder and preparing for the moment they would finally take to the skies in combat. June 1942. The Night Bomber Regiment 588, known disparagingly by their male colleagues as the Flying Cow, was finally given its chance to prove that women could be more than capable combat pilots. After months of preparation, training, and frustration, the regiment was entrusted with a high-stakes mission: attack a German base in Ukraine under the cover of darkness. The mission was as daring as it was dangerous. 3 PO-2 biplanes, each carrying 2 100-kilogram bombs strapped under their wings, lifted off into the inky night. The PO-2 was a slow, low-flying aircraft, originally designed for crop dusting and training, not warfare, yet its simplicity and agility made it ideal for nighttime operations. As the planes approached their target, the tension in the cockpits was palpable. The first pilot prepared to light up the landscape with parachute flares, a crucial step to ensure the accuracy of the bombing. But this act also meant breaking the cover of darkness, exposing the fragile planes to the Germans' sophisticated searchlights and deadly anti-aircraft guns. The parachute flares ignited the sky, illuminating the German base below. The pilot of the lead plane pulled the release lever, and the bombs tumbled toward their target. Moments later, explosions erupted on the ground, engulfing buildings in flames. As the remaining planes followed suit, the German defenses roared to life. Searchlights scanned the sky, desperately seeking the source of the attack, while anti-aircraft guns fired relentlessly. The slow-moving PO-2s, vulnerable against such firepower, became a terrifyingly easy target. But these were no ordinary pilots. They had trained for this exact scenario. In a daring maneuver, the women piloting the PO-2s dove even lower, beneath the sweeping beams of light. Flying just meters above the ground, they evaded detection and began their journey back to base. When the surviving planes returned, the regiment erupted in celebration. Their first mission had been a success. German buildings lay in ruins, fires raged, and they had escaped the clutches of the enemy's defenses. It was proof that they could not only stand alongside their male counterparts, but could also excel in their own right. But the jubilation was short-lived. One of the 3 planes didn't return. The absence hung heavy over the celebration, casting a shadow on their achievement. The fate of the missing plane remained a mystery until after the war. Investigations revealed that the plane had been forced to make an emergency landing in a field. Tragically, the 2 pilots aboard had bled to death in the cockpit. Shrapnel from German anti-aircraft guns had pierced the plane's thin canvas fuselage, a vulnerability of the PO-2s that the women had always known. This stark reality drove home the dangers these women faced nightly. They weren't just flying under precarious conditions. They were flying in death traps, with nothing but their skill and courage to protect them. Despite flying outdated, rickety planes that seemed better suited for a museum than a battlefield, the women of the 588th Night Bomber Regiment quickly became a nightmare for the Germans. Their missions were as ingenious as they were terrifying. Silent as shadows, the Nightwitches, as the Germans began to call them, struck under the cover of darkness, leaving their targets in flames and their enemies in a state of paranoia. The old Po-2 biplanes were dangerously slow and fragile, but their simplicity turned into an advantage. Their engines were nearly inaudible when idling, and the women often cut their engines entirely to glide silently over German positions. By the time the bombs hit their targets, the Germans had no time to react. This unrelenting unpredictability crushed German morale. The enemy was humiliated and infuriated. How could these fragile planes piloted by women whom many German soldiers derisively called simple housewives, create such chaos? The very sight of the old planes compounded their shame. If even these planes and their female pilots could outwit them, what else might they face? To make sense of the relentless nightly attacks, the Germans resorted to superstition. Rumors spread through their ranks that these women had been given chemical injections to enhance their vision, allowing them to see in the dark. It wasn't just skill, they believed, it was sorcery, hence the nickname Nightwitches. Yet there was nothing supernatural about their success. It came down to sheer bravery and relentless determination, but with every daring mission, the risks mounted. The women flew multiple missions each night, sometimes up to 10, but the PO2 could only carry 2 bombs per flight, meaning they had to return again and again to rearm. This made them frequent targets for German anti-aircraft fire. Tragically, many never made it back. A single well-placed bullet could pierce the canvas and wood structure of the plane, turning it into a fireball. The pilots carried signal flares for illumination, but when the cockpit was engulfed in flames, these flares exploded, transforming the inferno into a kaleidoscope of deadly red and green lights. For the women, every mission could be their last. While the fear of being shot down was ever present, an even darker threat loomed: capture by the Germans. Stories of Nazi brutality reached the women, chilling tales of torture and sexual violence inflicted on female prisoners. The thought of falling into enemy hands was unbearable. Many pilots carried a final bullet in their pistols, meant for themselves if the unthinkable happened. Others vowed to stay in the air until the very end, choosing death in the skies over capture on the ground. After 8 grueling months in combat, the 588th Night Bomber Regiment finally received the honor they had long yearned for. They were officially renamed the 46th Guards Regiment, a prestigious title reserved for the Soviet military elite. This recognition placed them among the most revered combat units of the Red Army, a true badge of honor for their courage and relentless efforts. But triumph was tinged with tragedy. The regiment suffered a devastating loss when their beloved leader, Major Marina Raskova, perished in a routine flight during poor weather conditions. Her death was a blow to the entire unit, yet her legacy spurred them on. With their continued efforts, the Nightwitches played a crucial role in liberating Crimea and Belarus in 1944. By May of 1945, they were flying missions to bomb the last pockets of German resistance around Berlin, bringing the war to its dramatic close. Among the legends of the Nightwitches was Lydia Litviak, known as the White Rose of Stalingrad. Litviak wasn't part of the 588th, but flew as a fighter pilot, becoming one of the most celebrated women in aviation history. With 12 confirmed kills, she earned the respect of both allies and enemies. Her reputation struck such fear into the Germans that their radios often crackled with warnings. Achtung! Achtung! Litviak! For a Luft pilot to be brought down by Litviak was a mark of disgrace, a stinging humiliation not easily forgotten. One of her most famous encounters occurred when she shot down a German pilot who parachuted to safety. Demanding to meet his opponent face to face, the pilot was stunned when a beautiful blonde woman in her early 20s entered the room. At first, he believed it was a cruel joke, but Litviak coolly sat down and, with unwavering confidence, recounted every detail of their aerial battle. When she finished, the German pilot was so awestruck that he fell to his knees and offered her his gold wristwatch as a token of respect. Litviak declined, dismissing him with icy composure. Her plane, decorated with her trademark white roses, became her signature, but those same roses marked her for death. In August 1943, Litviak's Yak-1 fighter was ambushed by 2 German aircraft. She was shot down, and her body was not recovered until 1979. Her death became a poignant symbol of the sacrifice and bravery of Soviet female pilots. The Nightwitches of the 588th Regiment left an indelible mark on World War II. Over the course of the war, they completed more than 23,000 missions and dropped over 3,000 tons of bombs on enemy positions. At their peak, the regiment boasted 80 pilots and navigators, operating tirelessly under the harshest conditions. Their bravery and tenacity earned 23 of the regiment's pilots the title of Hero of the Soviet Union, one of the nation's highest honors. But the cost was steep. 30 women lost their lives in combat. The Nightwitches became one of the most decorated units in the Soviet military, embodying the resilience and ingenuity that defined the Red Army during the war. Despite outdated equipment, relentless danger, and the constant specter of death, these women defied every expectation, proving that determination could turn even the simplest tools into weapons of war. This concludes the first episode of my podcast on World War II. I hope you found today's topic both engaging and thought-provoking. The bravery and ingenuity of the Nightwitches is just one of many stories from the war that continue to inspire and amaze. But the story doesn't end here. In our next episode, we delve into the life of one of Hitler's most ruthless and favored lieutenants, a man who coldly crushed his rivals and worked tirelessly to eliminate all opposition to Nazism. At the peak of his career, he devised his horrifying and infamous legacy, the final solution, the systematic extermination of Europe's Jewish population. The person I'm talking about is, of course, none other than Reinhard Heydrich. If this sounds like a subject that intrigues you, be sure to subscribe to the Academy of History and Culture and follow this podcast as we explore the many complex and chilling facets of World War II. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to sharing more stories with you next time.